Morning, everyone. I'm Police Commission President Steve Soberoff. I'm joined today by my fellow Police Commissioner Shane Murphy Goldsmith and by Richard Tiefank, who is the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Police Commission. The three of us want to thank you for coming today to this most important and final of the 6 community meetings that is important for us to hear what qualities, characteristics, and competencies you would like to see in your next chief of police. Now, you're going to hear me speak slowly this morning because I don't want this meeting to be over till noon because I want to go to the Apple Pan for lunch after this. So maybe we should just reconvene at the Apple Pan. Your chief of police for the past 8.5 years, Charlie Beck, has served in the LAPD for 42 years, as chief for 8.5 years, with dignity and distinction, and has announced his retirement effective June 27th of this year. He picked that day because it's his birthday. But the important thing about it is if we complete this process before June 27th, his term will be a little shorter. If we complete it after June 27th, his term will be a little longer. We are committed to not having an interim chief. So there will, the next chief will take the baton directly from Charlie Beck. Under the city charter, the general manager of the city personnel department, in conjunction with the Board of Police Commissioners, conducts the recruitment. The applications for the chief of police will be submitted to the personnel department, who will forward the applications to the police commission. The most qualified candidates will be interviewed by the entire police commission. The entire list of applicants will be forwarded to a subcommittee of the police commission consisting of Commission Vice President Matt Johnson and myself. We will make the determination of which of the applicants will be interviewed by the entire police commission. The police commission then provides the mayor the names of 3 candidates in rank order. Some mayors have chosen to make public the name of the 3 candidates. Some have chosen not to. No mayor has chosen to make public the rankings that the police commission, how the police commission ranks the candidates. From those 3, the mayor will select his appointee, whose name will be forwarded to the city council for confirmation. Commissioner Johnson and I have had detailed discussions with Mayor Garcetti on this issue to ask him if he was predisposed to any one person or had any had any thoughts or leanings. And he convinced both of us that he has strong thoughts and strong disposition and strong leanings to whomever we feel should be the next chief. But he's going to leave the work to us, meaning you and us. So we decided that we would have a series of meetings, in addition to our public meetings. We would have a series of meetings in the communities. This is the 6th of 6 of those meetings. Not to check off a box that we've had 6 meetings, but to listen to what you felt was important in your next chief. And the reason that we're doing it early, relatively early in the process, is we haven't written our help wanted ad yet. And we felt that it was important, before we write that help wanted ad and distribute. This is a very big job in law enforcement, nationally, internationally, and a very prestigious job in law enforcement, because this police department leads America in community policing. And community policing is the future of policing in America, and hopefully in the world. So we've gotten a lot of input. I've learned, I had my own thoughts about what the next chief, he or she, what kind of characteristics and mannerisms the next chief should have. And you know what? They've changed since these meetings. I've heard different things from different people that have actually changed my mind. Before we start, I'll read you some of my notes, and some of it may be surprising to you, and may be meaningful to you, and may not be meaningful to you. The thing that we ask is, we hope you're comfortable enough to come up here and tell us. If you're not, I'm going to wait around afterwards, and I'm happy to talk to you individually, if you're mic shy. We've had a few mic shy people. But please don't leave here saying, hey, I really should have said this, or I really should have said that, because then you wasted your time, and you wasted our time. So tell us what you think. Stay on message. We're here only to talk about the chief of police. And I think it's going to be a meaningful time for us and for you, hopefully. Commissioner Goldsmith.
Thank you, Commissioner Soboroff. This position is one of the most important leadership positions in the city of Los Angeles, and so it's important that everyday Angelinos, like all of you, who are directly impacted by the Los Angeles Police Department, help us to identify the qualities that this leader should possess. So I really want to thank all of you for being here. I know you could be doing other things on a Saturday morning, so I really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with us. There is an online survey at lacity.org and also per.lacity.org. And there are paper copies of the survey in the back of the room that you can complete if you want to do it that way. And you can also send comments via email to per.cop.comments@lacity.org. So this is all very helpful to us as we prepare the brochure and the recruitment and the interview questions for our candidates. So please, as Commissioner Soboroff said, tell us what you think.
I'd like to,
Oh, there's more.
okay, yeah.
Okay, there's more.
This is sort of our process for today.
Okay, so please make sure to fill out a comment card so we can call speakers forward in an orderly manner. And to respect everyone's time, we ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes, as we do in our regular commission meetings. And since this meeting is to gather your input on the qualities, characteristics, and competencies of the chief of police, we just ask that you keep your comments to that subject. Thank you.
If you feel like you need to talk more than 2 minutes, you've come all this way, yeah, I'm not going to cut you off today, because you're helping us, and we appreciate your time. I would like to introduce to you our Executive Director, Richard Teefank, and ask him to talk to you a little bit more about the process after today, and also to tell you a little bit about his background, which is really, we're really lucky to have him.
Thank you, Commissioner Soboroff. As to the survey, as Commissioner Goldsmith mentioned, there are surveys outside. If you didn't pick one up, we have them on a table outside. If you would complete it today, we can input it through the personnel website. The survey results are going to be tabulated, and they'll be posted on the department and city personnel website for people to see what the overall results of the surveys were. As Commissioner Goldsmith indicated, you can find them at 3 locations online. That would be lacity.org or lapdonline.org or per.cop.lacity.org. So if you go to any of the city websites, on the first page, there'll be about a 3-inch square with a badge. You click on that, it'll take you right to the survey. The survey is in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Tagalog, and then also it is an email link that is there. If you want to send an email with more comments, just click on it at the same time. It'll pop up an email link, and you can send your comments, and they'll all come to the commission. The purpose of all the data is to, again, formulate the recruitment flyer that'll be distributed nationwide, and then also to assist the commission as they prepare interview questions for the future candidates as they would come and interview with the commissioners. The timeline for the process is, it is anticipated in the first week of June that the commission will have the ranked order of 3 names provided to Mayor Garcetti, and then the mayor will take on the process from there, as Commissioner Soboroff indicated, with the hope of having a police chief appointed and confirmed by the date of June 27th, which is Chief Beck's retirement date and his 65th birthday also. So that's a little bit of the process and what will go forward. And again, please, if you want to fill out the survey today, fine. If not, you want to go online and do it, encourage your friends to do it also. It's really important to get that information. It will be a big help to us. Commissioner Soboroff always embarrasses me and wants me to say something about myself. I'll be very brief. I've been with the commission 14 years, executive director for the past 13 and a half years. I helped the commission in the search when Chief Bratton retired and Chief Beck was appointed. I assisted in the Bratton reappointment and the Beck reappointment process with the commission. So I'm familiar with the city charter and the process and have that familiarity. My law enforcement career goes back to 1968, began as a police officer, worked for 3 police departments. I was police chief in 2 police departments, retired in March of 2001 after almost 33 years in law enforcement, worked for the State Attorney General, Bill Lockyer, for 2.5 years prior to coming to this job. So in December of this year, I'll have completed 50 years in law enforcement. So I've seen a few changes in the profession over those years.
That's amazing.
And the commission voted unanimously to sign a certificate congratulating Mr. Tiefenk on his requirement once he reaches 70 years with the department.
I'm already past 70 years of age, so come on.
Nothing. If it's before then, you don't get nothing, man. No watch, no nothing. Okay, let me read to you. You'll see that all of us will be frantically taking notes and frantically listening. And let me read to you some of the notes from the last couple of meetings, things that sort of stuck with me as people said them. I want a chief who is perceived to be there for all of us. I want a chief who, during a parade, doesn't just ride in his car, but gets out of the car and works the line in every neighborhood. I want a chief who is approachable, one who builds trust everywhere, with all communities, with the 10,800 rank and file, with unions, with the homeless, with the underserved. I want a chief who's compassionate. I want a chief with vision, with ingenuity. I want a chief that surrounds him or herself with doers, with implementers, people that have experience. I want a chief that understands how important technology is, not just for the department, but for the public, that's media savvy. I want a chief that's a communicator, that can communicate with the officers, communicate with the politicians, communicate with the communities, communicate with the media. I want a chief that's introspective, that'll sit down and say, what could we have done better? I want a chief that says, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I want a chief that will disagree or agree with the commission, with the mayor, with the union. I want a chief that will speak to this mess that we have going on with semi-automatic weapons, for protecting students at schools. I want a chief that feels like every member of the public is a client, is a customer. I want a chief that really understands the culture of constitutional policing, civil liberties. I want a chief that knows how to make do with limited resources, with deployment issues, with equipment issues. I want a chief that steps it up when it comes to issues of the day. Homelessness, mental illness issues, human trafficking issues, sex trafficking issues, labor trafficking issues. I want a chief that is sensitive to victims, even to victims, and to their families. I want a chief who abhors domestic violence and child abuse. I want a chief that'll take a look at the issues with items that come up like the cadet issue and the drop issue and say, hey, let's just not end these great, phenomenal programs. Let's just fix the things that are wrong with them. Those are a couple of my notes. So we're going to start. We'll call your cards. If you don't have a card in, don't worry about it. I'm going to encourage you to come up, to feel comfortable about coming up. There's nothing wrong. You can say. I would ask again, like the three of us have asked, this meeting is about preparing us to choose the next chief of police. This is not about just general comments or other things. We can certainly deal with those. So let's begin.
Thank you. The first speaker, Shayna.
Welcome, Shannon.
First out.
Of course I
You
am.
can come back. You can come back and be
first.
last too.
No, it's okay. Let's get it out of the way.
My pen's ready.
I have my notes here, so forgive me. My name is Shayna Lloyd. I live in Los Angeles. I'm going to try and stay on message as much as I can, but most importantly, I want a chief that knows Los Angeles and its unique, diverse population. We have a large Latino and Black population, LGBTQ community. We have, a wealthy Beverly Hills crowd all the way to South Los Angeles. And that person needs to know the unique needs and diverse needs of Los Angeles. That said, it would be interesting to possibly have a minority or woman. You have a police force that's over 40% Latino, which I think is amazing compared to the 90s and early 2000s. And immigration is a huge issue. So I need that person to make sure they understand the needs of that population. And that said, we also still have a huge gap between law enforcement and communities of color. I mean, hands down, across the country, it's a huge issue. I think Los Angeles is taking great strides, and Charlie Beck has done some things, but we can go further. And that person really needs to understand and foster those relationships. That for me, that's a hugely important issue. We have community policing. It can go further. I know for me, as a law-abiding citizen of Los Angeles, I'm still nervous.
Put money in the meter out there?
I did. You know, I'm still nervous if there are a bunch of cop cars that roll by me. If I don't already know them, and I know a lot of officers in my division. But, you know, it's nerve-wracking for me. So I am concerned about myself and members of my community, and I want to make sure that those relationships, and we can close that gap. And Los Angeles is a major city. We have to lead the charge. That person has to be progressive.
Take your time.
Progressive and innovative, and I think that should be a priority.
Okay.
And I think, you know, for me, maybe that is walking a beat, so these kids and these people really know you before anything happens. So that way, I mean, it might be uncomfortable in the beginning, but that way they know you before anything happens. So it makes it easier for them to call you when something happens, and it's going to make it safer for the officer in the community. Just going back to gun safety, also someone that's important, that's a priority for them, keeping our kids safe, watching the flow of guns, both legally and illegally, that often come through Los Angeles, and making sure we're having some measures to control that. And a lot of kids are uncomfortable with law enforcement, so that goes back to my previous point, getting to a place where they feel comfortable, particularly kids of color, calling LAPD when there's an issue or a threat at their school, and not feeling like they are going to be subject to persecution. Let's see. This is a big issue for me, is also having a chief that does not take forever to render a decision when there has been misconduct amongst one of the rank and file. To take over a year, and I believe in due process, to reprimand an officer who pulls a gun on a 13-year-old kid when we're already having issues with gun control here in this country is too long. We need to be able to set the tone for here and for the rest of the country. But we need somebody that's not afraid to make a decision, and one swiftly in those cases, even after investigating. That's an important issue for me. So I think that's it.
You have more,
I'll say that. Yeah, we can talk
Thanks
later.
for taking the time
Yeah.
and spending time.
Okay.
You know, I just want to say one thing. The comments that I gave you were not, those were in addition to my basics. And the basics are, you know, pretty obvious. I mean, the first call that I made was to Connie Rice. Connie's a national figure and a local figure when it comes to community policing, to civil rights, to constitutional rights. And her words, I'm not going to forget. She goes, if you need one thing, you need another reformer. You need another reformer. We're a third of the way there with Bratton, with Beck, but we're a third of the way there. We need to continue to reform towards perfecting community policing. So I don't want you to feel like I missed those big basic things, because some of the things you brought up are so important. Thanks for taking the time. Next.
Adam Smith.
Mr. Smith?
Can I lift this up? I guess not.
We didn't know there'd be any tall people here today.
Sorry, I gotta pull up my notes.
Take your time, sir.
As we gather here this morning to give input to the Police Commission, I think it's worth looking at how input from this community is received by this commission. Last year, the LAPD rolled out a proposed drone policy, despite 4 minimally promoted community outreach meetings, all taking place on the same night last August. Folks from the community came out, and almost every person in those 4 rooms spoke out against the LAPD's expansion of surveillance and data collection through the use of drones. Over 1,500 emails were sent to the commission against the drones, while only 96 emails were sent in support. Over 5,400 petition signatures were collected from LA residents saying no to drones. About 650 postcards were sent in from residents saying no to these drones, and at the regular police commission meetings, not conveniently held on Tuesday mornings at 9:30 a.m. at a LAPD.
Mr. Smith, do you want to say anything about the chief of police?
I'm
This
working
is a
on it.
speech you read every single week, but do you want to talk about the chief of police? Because that's why we're here, sir?
We're talking about the process of...
No, we're talking about the characteristics of a
Okay.
chief, but why don't you do that?
All right.
Okay? Because I've heard your
So
speech.
I won't talk about the farce of the public outreach.
Thank you, sir.
I will speak to, and I'm sorry I have to bend over, this is taped to the floor, so I can't actually stand up. Sorry.
Yeah, you want a chair?
No, it's all right. It's taped there too.
Okay.
It's all right. All right. How about, what I don't want in a chief is someone that after this commission,
There you go.
in the case of 25-year-old Ezell Ford in 2014, who was shot 3 times in the back by Officer Charlton Wampler, and this police commission ruled that he acted out of policy, I don't want a chief who will then get on Facebook and say, to reach out to all the rank and file saying, I will protect you like the vest that you wear, because he didn't agree with your decision. I don't want a chief who claims community policing, and I know that we had, I think 93% of rank and file had 4 hours of de-escalation training last year, but we had a 23% increase in the homeless population in LA City going into 2017, and we have the police out there acting like mental health workers when they're not mental health workers. So I need a chief, or I don't want a chief that will act like we can police away the homeless problem. I don't want a chief who's going to say that community policing is a success in Los Angeles when 7 out of the last 8 years, Los Angeles has led all police departments across the country in the killings of its residents. Those are some of the things I don't want in a new chief.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Greg Anulet.
Greg, welcome. Take your time, sir.
Stepped over the fewest toes going that way. Yes, my name is Greg Anelick, and I'm a resident of Playa del Rey. I'm on the Westchester Playa del Rey Neighborhood Council, and I co-chair the Public Safety Committee. What I'm looking for in a police chief is one who focuses more on prevention. Let's prevent things from happening before they do. And I see that happening by getting the officers out in the good times more so than the bad times. I'm sorry I don't know these officers, but I do know Senior Lead Officer Sofia Castaneda in my area. I see Sofia frequently at our neighborhood council meetings and other events. So I've got this face that's familiar that we can talk freely to, and she's almost like a sister. So that's something I think is really important. Is not just showing up. I can allocate resources in the emergency when things are going bad, and then we pull out and we're gone. So seeing the officers again and again and again in the good times I think is very beneficial. And the other thing I would like to see in a police commissioner, police chief, thank you, is someone that has the courage to go to the citizens and say, look, I need you to do some things too, okay? Your safety is not solely in the possession of the police department. You have to take some actions also. We had a series of break-ins in the Westchester Playa del Rey area, people breaking into cars, stealing things. Well, when you leave your laptop right there in plain view, that's tempting. And they realize now there's a whole source of these areas to steal things from. And we did have our police force come out and say, look, you got to harden your target here. You've got to take responsibility. You've got to lock your doors.
Take your time.
And that's what I need the police chief to say. Hey, we'll do our part. You have to do your part too. So it's a little bit of tough love, but this is how it's going to make it work. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. And thanks for all you're doing.
Troy Isaac.
What do you say?
Let's get it.
Hey, Troy.
Good morning. I just have to say, for people that don't know me, now you do. I served 24 years of my life in prison. That's 24 years, okay? I have been hit, I have been beat for the color of my skin or the sexual orientation. But when I got out in 2008, I got out with a purpose and a plan and a vision. And I met a person by the name of Beatrice Gurmala. She was the captain in Hollywood. She's been there ever since. Now she's the assistant chief, and she's the person that I'm recommending to be the chief of police. A person with integrity, a person that's excellent with communication, a person that is open to bringing the groups together to resolve an issue. And I'm part of the LGBTQ community, but I also work with LA Voice. I also work with Black Lives Matter. I work with these individuals. And this woman, and just so happens, she's here today. She's sitting in here today. She's a person who will say, let's bring the people together. Let's work it out. Let's come up with a resolution. I have sat with her in meetings with individuals that didn't believe, but they believed when they walked out. Because I got a call saying, Troy, I don't believe it. I don't believe that we have a meeting. I don't believe that she connected us with the captain that we've been trying to have a meeting with forever. But she did it, and I'm here to say, I get goosebumps. Literally, she's here. If you don't believe, you will believe, because she's not a pushover. She's straightforward, and she will do the right thing for this city. And she can take it off and move it forward in this city. Thank you.
Karina
Troy,
Samala.
next time you come up, try a little passion and like feel what you're saying, you know what I mean? You're terrific. Thank you, sir. Tell me your name again.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for having this meeting and having us here today.
Oh, Karina.
I am Karina Samala, and I'm the chair of the Transgender Advisory Council of the City of Los Angeles. I'm also with the Transgender Advisory Board of the City of West Hollywood. I've dealt with the problems with our community in the past. I was also the chair of the Human Relations Commission of the City of Los Angeles that dealt with the policies on interaction with transgender individuals in the city on both Sheriff's Department and LAPD, which is currently being used right now by LAPD that was approved 2 years ago by Chief Beck. But that piece of paper is nothing if it is not done or being followed by the department. And I'm here to say that we are still the highest rate that being targeted, being killed out on the streets because of discrimination and hatred against our marginalized community. And Chief Kamala, I've known her since she was a captain of the Hollywood station. I worked with her, bring problems, and especially with their vice. There's still a disconnect and still misunderstanding. That's the reason why we're having this meetings constantly with our working group, dealing with the issues with our community. And we need a chief such as her, who's really knowing and our problems, knowing what we go through with the working group that we had established also with our community, dealing with our issues, working with our communities. We need a chief such as her. Thank you.
Karina, thank you very much for taking the time.
Michelle Marshall.
Welcome, Michelle. Take your time.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Michelle Marshall. Thanks for convening this meeting so that you can get input from the community about what we want. I'm going to do two things, and I'll tell, if I have time, give a little anecdote.
You have time.
I want a police chief who recognizes the inequality in policing and who wants to make a change. I want a police chief who will address the covert and overt racial biases in America as a whole and ensure that the culture of the LAPD does not reflect the same biases. I want a police chief who will understand that I am not an animal, I am not bad, I am not a suspicious character, and I am not a criminal simply because my skin is black. I want a police chief who will empower their officers to give the same break to a black person as they give the same break to my white counterparts. I want a police chief who will make the changes necessary for a black person to drive or walk down the street in any neighborhood in LA without feeling profiled or scared. I want all the non-white people to feel the same way my white privileged friends feel about the police. They feel that they are there to help them and not to put them in cages. I have two anecdotes that I want to share. One being, I was in a group of my mommy friends, and I have the privilege, I guess, of living in a predominantly affluent white neighborhood. And most of my friends are white and privileged and affluent. And we were sitting around with a bunch of mommies talking, and the story was one of the moms had smoked a joint, a white woman, and she got high and was paranoid. During the paranoia, she locked herself in the bathroom and called the police on herself. She said, "You have to come get me. I'm high and I can't take care of my kids." My friends are all telling the story, laughing. The police came to the door, knocked on the door. She let them in. They assessed the situation and said to her, "You're okay. Please tell us you're okay so that we don't have to take you in." She insisted, "I am high. I'm paranoid. You have to take me and take my kids away." However, the police saw her husband, saw everything and said, "No, we're fine, you're fine, just tell us you're fine." So she then said, after a while, "I'm okay," and they left. All my friends heard this story and laughed, and I, as the only black woman in this group, thought to myself, holy crap, that never would have happened to me or to any of my black friends. So my point is, all I want is that for my black friends who are not privileged or white to feel the same when they see a police officer, to feel that they're there to help them, to support them, and not feel that they're there to lock them up in cages and for mass incarceration. I want to feel safe driving down the neighborhood in South Central, the same way I feel driving down West Hollywood. I drive in my car in West Hollywood, I see a police officer, and I think, yay, he's there to make sure I'm safe. He's there to make sure that I don't need any help. If my car breaks down, if something goes wrong, I can call him. I was in South Central 2 days ago, and I was driving, and I saw a lot of police officers, and I was scared. I was scared. They're here not to help me. They're here to catch me doing something wrong, to lock me up and take me away. So all I want in police chief is to recognize that slavery has a lot of deep roots in America, and we're taking some time, but we're getting there. But I want a police chief to recognize that there's overt and covert biases. Black people are looked as criminals just because of the color of our skin. And I want him to understand that that's the case, but somehow hire people and train them to understand we're not animals, we're not criminals. We just want the same opportunities, and we want to look at the police officers the same way that my white friends do.
What about your second anecdote?
Oh, it was about, I'm a part of the National Jewish Council of Jewish Women. Yes, I'm not Jewish, but I'm just part of my activities. And there was a rally, and she went to the rally, and she was concerned that there weren't enough police at the rally for the Women's March. And I remember thinking, I'm scared going to a rally and there's a lot of police, because I'm thinking, if anything happens, I'm going to get arrested. While she's thinking, oh my gosh, there's not enough police force. So it's just the mentality, and I sit in a room with a lot of privileged white people, and when they speak, their experiences are just so different than the experiences of my black counterparts. And I just want it to be equal, and I understand it's going to take some time for that to happen, but I want a police chief to recognize that this is just part of the American DNA, and it's going to take time to change, but I want him, when he hires people, to address it and educate them to understand that you have these biases that's innate, but let's work really hard to overcome those biases. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucy Han.
Lucy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Lucy Hahn, and I'm from Playa del Rey, represent Friends of the Jungle. We'd like to have a police chief that will openly support issues that protect the public safety, and would be able to push back against city council, city attorney, if they were promoting policies that put the public safety at risk. That's happened before. We'd like to have a police chief that could dedicate additional LAPD resources to areas where staffing is inadequate. My anecdote, recently, there was a push from the city to lift the beach curfew in the city of Los Angeles. Affects many different beaches. The curfew is from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. And the city attorney was trying to push that through. It would be very unsafe. And what we're trying to do is see if the police chief would be able to support us, because that's really important, to be able to support the public when their safety is at risk. Just a couple quotes.
Mark me down, I will.
Okay, great. LAPD no longer has a beach patrol. So if there's any issues on the beach, if they lift the beach curfew, what they do now is they recruit lifeguards, because they've got the cars, to investigate active crime scenes, because there's no other way for the police to get there. Their cars don't go in the sand. And that's a safety risk. These people, they're not trained, the lifeguards, and the response time is going to be slower. Secondly, there was a recent crime study from Parks and Recs and Parks, the city, and, quote, the proposed project, the curfew, lifting the curfew, is anticipated to generate a need for more police protection or emergency response services substantially beyond what is currently provided in the local community. So we would hope that the new police chief would see that study and say, okay, well, we'll give you additional resources. Let's see. And then there was another also study done, and it says, according to LAPD commanding officer at Pacific, the current ordinance, the current beach curfew, keeps in check the number of potential criminal acts and reduces the area that the police officers must patrol. And also Pacific Captain Setzer, he had said he forecasted that lifting the current beach curfew will increase beach crime. So we would hope that the police chief would be able to recognize that the city, his LAPD staff that are on the ground troops, that he would take their advice and make sure that we've got the right resources, or also tell the city, like, this is not a good idea, we have to keep the curfew. So, all
Lisa,
right.
thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Robert Vaughn.
Welcome, Robert.
Yep. Hi, my name is Robert Vigini. I'm a resident of the Westchester area of Los Angeles. The main reason I came here today is I found the survey online and I just didn't think it addressed what I'm most concerned about, and that is the militarization of police forces across the country, and I just really want the next chief to be promoting a demilitarization mentality towards the Los Angeles Police Department. And the other issue that I'm concerned about is the increased use of asset forfeiture. I would like the next police chief to have a very strict use of that policy and be very transparent about it, whether that's like having a website where we can see what has been taken from citizens. But those are the two biggest issues that concern me. So if you can take that into account, I'd appreciate it.
Helpful, thank you, Robert.
Patrick Butler.
Patrick?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, commissioners, for having this forum. little bit of context about myself is I live in Westchester, lived there almost 50 years. My parents, my mom's a Mexican immigrant. I learned English in school, and my dad worked at Hughes Aircraft for 47 years. In fact, Mrs. Soboroff, the office that my dad worked in was put as a historic building there, and it's still there. And so when I walk,
Where Howard Hughes' office.
exactly, where 72 and Sunny is.
I tried to sell a Howard Hughes toilet it was in the building.
No.
Because I thought it would sell on eBay and we could give the money to charity, but
What happened? Nothing.
as it turns out, it wasn't really his toilet, and it was replaced, and blah, blah. And I didn't
Awesome.
want to lie
Yeah.
about it and sucker somebody.
But
Who wouldn't want to own Howard Hughes' toilet?
exactly. Yeah.
We'll start the clock.
No, you bet. Thank you. And just in context, I lived on the west side my whole life, and in full disclosure, I'm coming in my third decade as an LA City firefighter. I was lived here. My kids have grown up here, and I think it's really important to weigh in on the next chief of police. And what I can tell you from a member of the public, living here my whole life and put my kids through public schools here, and my mom was a public school teacher, is that one, I want to see a chief of police that is a master, has mastery at the job. That someone who could step in day one, you could slide the keys to them and say, this is your department, we're going to let you drive it. And what that means is a chief of police that has a strong foundation in operations, because really, at the end of the day, that's a lot of what really matters to us in terms of actual public safety is, does a chief of police have a background in operations? Do they have a background in education? Do they have a sense of curiosity? And do they have the type of candor we need in our city? And I think lastly with mastery, do they back their police officers? Because by and large, 99.9% of the men and women who wear this badge here come to work every day to do a good job.
Patrick, you still a fire?
I am, yeah.
Where,
I just got off shift. I work at a station in Sherman Oaks, but I live in Westchester.
would you recommend to your children or to your neighbors that they become members of the fire department?
Absolutely, but I absolutely would. The department has treated me really well. It's provided my family the type of upbringing that I could put, my kids live in LA with me, that I was able to support a family. By no means am I going to be a millionaire like by what the LA Times articles say, but I'm going to be able to live long enough to support my kids and have a great family.
So let me add, I want a chief where every officer will come up here and say the exact same thing in response to that question.
Absolutely. It's interesting because my daughter, she's at a UC school where the local chief of police, who used to be a former deputy chief, has instituted a Citizens Academy aimed at college kids. So my daughter was there Thursday night, and she called me up, she says, Dad, I got to be part of a simulator, a shoot, don't shoot simulator. And she explained to me everything about what it meant to do that. Yeah. And my daughter was teaching me about the qualities of a police officer. And so, anyhow, I think there's a lot of room for improvement in the fire department. I don't think we need reform. I think we need transformation. The other piece I want to say is I've had a complete different experience with police officers in Los Angeles, is that in my community we have a senior lead officer, Ruben Garcia, who everyone knows, everyone's happy to go talk to. He's a giant of a man, has a SWAT background, but folks in the community know him. I think, before I digress, I think the last piece to this is the type of chief of police that I look for in my community, because I've been here many, many years, I don't plan to go anywhere, is I have 2 daughters and a wife, and I can tell you I was raised by my 2 daughters and my wife. As a proud, I'd say macho firefighter, I think the city needs a female chief of police. I 100% can tell you that What I've learned in my career is that my daughters and my wife had made me a better firefighter, father, and member of this community. And I think it's time that we consider that and pick someone who's from the city, who knows our city and knows how to really celebrate our city. So I thank you very much for the
Thanks for your
opportunity.
service, too.
You bet. Thanks.
Carolina Goodman.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can't we put the cards in order of height? So we can ease the microphone.
I first want to thank you, LAPD and the commissioners, for having this democratic process. It is really a model for departments across the country. And I know that there are many departments that do not have this kind of a process, so thank you for that. Many of the reforms that have been mentioned or qualities in a police chief, I agree with. There hasn't been anything that I disagree with. But I do want to underscore some things. One of the things I want to underscore is that for the rank and file, they need to be rewarded for following policy. And those who don't need to be held accountable. I'm not sure that always happens, and I want a police chief who will work hard for that. Another thing about democratic process, thank you for letting the community give input, not just for this, but for other things. And I understand that the police union has to give input as well. I just want a police chief that will not be intimidated by the union who cares about safety, and I care about safety for the police. I really do. I care about safety for police, and I care about safety for community. I think we can have both, and I need a police chief who will do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Krishna Thangavel.
Hi,
Welcome.
Commissioners.
Welcome.
You guys are awesome. I think you should have a TV show, and we should do this community gathering at least like once a month, because I think you're getting real feedback from the
Don't
community.
you see our show? It's called Animal Kingdom.
So thank you. You're awesome. I support everything you're doing, and somebody needs to say that. Okay. I waved at Richard because I eavesdropped in at the Valley Commission meeting because
What kind of equipment were you using?
I showed up in person because I didn't know what the process was, and so now I'm prepared.
Okay.
I'm a representative of the Palisades. We've had a tremendous uptick in crime. We've been responding as a community by coming together to increase patrols that we pay for. But what is apparent is labor shortage is a big issue. I'd mentioned this in the Valley meeting, but now I'm a little clearer about how to communicate this. By 2030, the boomers are going to age out and retire from the workforce. So I would like the chief, male or female. I think that's awesome, by the way. I love that you've got support. I would like this to be a person that is very skilled at strategic planning. So here are the issues I see for strategic planning. Number one, labor shortage is here. I love that your daughter is going through an academy to get trained, because I think this chief is going to have to know how to scale using the population. As a community in the Palisades, we love Officer Moore, Michael Moore, our SLO, and we've been thinking of ways to help support prevention efforts. So that's scaling, labor shortage. Response time is a real problem. So the labor shortage is already here. And if somebody cannot come up with a plan to do that, I think however nice they are, do not hire them. Number two, I heard on NPR that your technology is outdated and that there are some There are some cost reasons why. I would love to have a chief that can go to the rich people in the community and say, hey, we need $63 million to update technology. Would you be willing to make a grant, for this effort? So this public-private partnerships to address important things such as technology should be a no-brainer. People will help if they're asked. So somebody that's comfortable with rich people would be great.
I think there's 6 or 7 people in Los Angeles.
Yeah, but go and ask for money. I worked on the foundation side, and we're happy to give money to support the public. So best practices you've already mentioned, and finally, just have someone on the team. It doesn't have to be the chief, but realize that social media is here today to help in so many community policing efforts. The chief does not need to do it, but just staff someone under that so that there is constant real-time information to the public about whether it's fires or earthquakes or criminal activity. I thank you so much for your time. I apologize I have to run. I'm very grateful that you received my comments, and I wish you good luck.
Thanks for taking the time to come over.
Bye-bye.
Isaac Bryan.
Full disclosure, Mr. Bryan. Mr. Bryan is a UCLA student, and he and I are, what is our relationship?
It's a tall people problem again. Commissioner Soboroff is my senior fellow. So every so often, he and I meet up and we sit and we talk about the issues of the day and life and mentorship. Also, full disclosure, I was at the Van Nuys meeting as well, so it's good to see you again, sir, and a number of you officers who seem to follow the meeting.
Listen up, this guy's going to be on the cover of Time magazine someday, so listen up.
So I was writing down a lot of thoughts, and I was thinking so as a researcher, I was thinking, what would academics say? What does the literature say? What would the community say? And then I realized I should just say what I would say. And so I thought about all the things that are important to me in a police chief and in a police department, and I made that list. First and foremost, I want to see a chief who knows that love and community embrace trumps fear and force. I want to see a chief who recognizes that no matter how thin the blue line is, it can still be divisive and separate the department from the community it has sworn to protect and serve. I want to see a chief who recognizes that with so many honorable officers who dedicate their lives to the service of others, that it's imperative that we continually assess, evaluate, and weed out the proclaimed few bad apples who sully the name of the entire department. That being said, I also want to see a chief who recognizes the history of American policing has 2 roots. One is Sir Robert Peel and the origins of Old English policing, and the other is uniquely American and closely aligned with slave catching, the enforcement of black codes, and the legacy of black and brown brutality. I want to see a chief who believes that even though officers are not mental health workers, that their solemn oath to serve requires that they be a critical component of the city's homeless strategy, and that component requires extreme humility and patience and a reliance on care and not handcuffing. I want to see a chief who also believes that now is not the time to ramp up cannabis enforcement. Too many communities that are currently being boxed out of a now legal industry have historically been destroyed by cannabis prohibition. Our new chief must embrace that truth and push back against those who would seek to use the department to enforce on those not legally operating.
Take your time.
I'm on my last point.
Take your time.
Most importantly, absolutely most importantly for me, I want to see a chief who loves me, who loves us, and is willing to prove that and show that time and time again, even in the face of extreme opposition. Thank you.
Alvin Ting.
Future police commissioner out there, Mr. Bryan. Morning, sir.
Morning. My name is Alvin Tang. I'm a current UCLA graduate student in the same program as Isaac, actually. I've lived in Los Angeles for the past 10 years, and I have some thoughts. So first, I want to say thank you to the police commissioners for having this meeting in the community. I've been to a few police commission meetings in the past, and it's always been very inconvenient to get there on a Tuesday morning in downtown, and so I would encourage future meetings in the community. I think this turnout really shows that this is a good space for the community to come out to and to actually voice our opinions. So thank you for making this space for us. In terms of the chief, I think the main thing that comes to mind is I would want a chief who is receptive to the voices of people from the community. Somebody who's committed to engaging community voices, especially those who have had historically bad experiences with LAPD. A candidate who is aware of the history both of policing in the United States, which, as the previous commenter alluded to, does have a strong foundation in controlling political dissidents, in controlling minority communities, in slave catching, but also understanding of the history of LAPD, which has a long track record of abuse of minority communities, abuse of black and brown communities here in the city, abuse of LGBTQ communities, abuse of political minority communities. So I would want a chief who understands that and allows that history to influence the policies that he or she sets forward, that allows that to influence how he or she interacts with these communities. I would want to see a chief who has a priority for accountability for individual officers, as we've seen over the past few years, but obviously over the history of policing in general, but over the past few years, there's been a larger social movement to call individual officers to account. And I would want to see a chief who is willing to put the safety of community members above and at the forefront rather than job security for individual officers, and have a very strong transparency in that process, in that discipline process, and be willing to stand up to the police union, as well as a demonstrated commitment to de-escalation, demilitarization, and training for for bias. So overall, I would just say that LAPD sets the tone for the rest of the country. A lot of policing reform, but also a lot of policing tactics have been set here. And so I would hope that this new chief would be willing to consider systematic reform in how LAPD operates, and the promotion of reform-minded officers within the department as well. So,
Good.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Marianne Dozier.
Marianne was the first one here today, so cut her some slack.
Thank you. I want to add my thanks to everyone else's for this opportunity. It's a wonderful example of democracy at work. Everyone has spoken so eloquently and expressed really all my thoughts. I don't disagree with anyone, and I really have nothing to add, but two of the things, well, three, I think, that I would like
Give
to
her extra
underline.
time.
And what's that?
We're going to give you extra time.
Great, great. One is I'd like a chief who continues Beck's work in overhauling training and putting an emphasis on training, including, top on my list, is implicit bias, recognition that we all, whether we know it or not, have biases against people who don't look or act like us, and that be recognized and accepted. And anyone who can't accept that in the training should not become a police officer. I'd like a chief who emphasizes the police force as protectors of all communities equally, regardless of socioeconomic, color, origins, ethnicities, as opposed to warriors who keep people in line. And I'd like a chief who, I don't know that the chief, him or herself, could do anything about this, but advocates for bail reform. We have a system that operates as a debtor's prison and keeps people in jail because they're poor. That is an abominable system that needs to be eradicated as soon as possible.
Before you leave today, I would like you to chat with Mr. Bryan, who is doing your thesis or your life or what on bail reform.
Who's Mr. Bryan?
Stand up, sir.
I calculated how much bail was levied in the city of Los Angeles.
Well, you guys get together on your own time.
Okay.
It's not a public deal.
Yeah.
But anyway, chat with him. He's like a wizard at this.
Okay.
And understands it.
Yeah, again,
Okay?
thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kathleen Stokes.
Welcome, Kathleen. Take your time.
Thank you. I think this is okay.
I think
Yeah,
so.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Much of what I want to say has already been said, but I just would like to emphasize, I'd like the new police chief to support the de-escalation training, to support SMART teams, to extend it beyond the new officers, to extend it to all of the experienced officers, and that contrary to what you frequently hear, de-escalation training across the country has reduced the risk to policemen. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Okay. We have another card for Adam
point.
Smith.
Mr. Smith, let's let anybody who wanted to talk the first time go first.
Okay. We have Reverend James
It's like
Jones.
What's that thing called? The buffet line in Vegas, you know, you gotta let the people go first. Welcome, sir.
Good, still good morning.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I'm, first and foremost, I want to thank you all for this opportunity to come. I do have relationships here by way of transparency. I am coming out of Watts, California, but I'm all over California when it comes down to it. I'm here today, as I said, I wear many hats in the community, better known as Pastor JJ. Former gang member who is now part of the Watts Gang Task Force, founder of Gangsters for Christ, and have great relationships with the law enforcement. I'm here, you say, well, what are you doing here? West Side from Watts. I'm here to speak on the relationship that we've established over in Watts with law enforcement, which is second to none in the nation. And I do want to, I would be remiss if I did not, I have a little story too to tell, and it's about a young African-American 13-year-old who was on the fence between going to get in the gang or was he going to stay in school. And as one of the, again, just one of the things I do, I was coaching the Jaguar track team, and this kid's getting ready to run the 800 for the first time, 800 meters. For those that don't know, that's twice around as fast as you can around the track. And that young, it's difficult. And that 13-year-old kid looked at me and said, Reverend JJ, if I pass out, don't worry about it. He said, call Captain T. Now, I say this because those that know, right, exactly. He's not African-American. And I'm looking at, well, for initially, I'm saying, what am I now, chopped liver? I got a call. But that's the type of, the relationship that I'd be remiss if I didn't say that those type of, we have developed great relationships over, and I over the years, trust me, I know, with law enforcement, I'm really confident that whoever the next chief is going to be, I'm sure I'm going to have a relation. I already have a relationship with them, but I just want to be transparent and just be, honest, bring that out there. Even the favorite here, I love her, okay? But let's be, again, I don't want, when you make your decisions on who you're going to be put to, let's not politicize it. Let's be, again, fair, and let's be accurate about what it is. Here we have a situation folks are saying over and over again about the law enforcement and the community. We have people coming from across the world that comes down to the Wascana Task Force meeting to experience what we've developed here. So let's take that into consideration. With that, again, thank you for your time.
Reverend, I do have a question for you, sir. Are you familiar with a restaurant called Local?
Yeah,
L-O-C-O-L?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I gave a shout out to the Apple Pan, but I'd like you to give that same shout out to Local right here. It's a community restaurant that has fantastic hamburgers on 103rd and what?
103rd in Compton, of
Yes,
course.
sir.
Yeah, I was there for the grand opening for Locals, and I said, we met I met you through Sweet Alice
Yeah,
back
right.
when you went back in the day when you ran, but of course, yeah, Locals, and so I put Locals out there also, like, again.
Okay, so if we go to Apple Pan, we'll head down there.
I like I said, I believe in transparency, kid. I have to throw a shout out to my coffee house, Watts Coffee House, as well as Locals.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. God bless you all.
James Nguyen.
Thank you, Reverend.
Good morning, my name is James Nguyen. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am a transgender man. I serve on the Los Angeles Transgender Advisory Council as well as the West Hollywood Transgender Advisory Board. And our community at the Transgender Advisory Council has discussed that we support current Assistant Chief B.E. Guatemala. I want to share an anecdote very quickly with regards to Assistant Chief Guatemala. There was a captain in LAPD who made a judgment. It was neither good nor bad. It was his intention was well-meaning, and the community did not accept that decision in a positive light and was concerned. Chief Guatemala sent herself into our Transgender Advisory Council meeting, not in some others, but the fact that she knew that we are a community that is least, one of the least underserved communities, and that she would send herself was truly very meaningful. She was a compassionate, but as well as, to me, an intelligent police chief. With regards to her presence, she shared that, honestly, what our community needs to do, and it spurned into creating Midnight Stroll, which is a community base serving the homeless population from dark 30 hours, basically 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. In doing so, now, a year later, the same captain, who has continually then worked with us as we are doing this Midnight Stroll once a month, came and visited Midnight Stroll with us at 11 p.m. In plain clothes and brought his wife. And I think that's extraordinarily commendable, both of Assistant Chief Guatemala and of Captain Polka. And it shows the kind of leadership that's needed to help underserved populations. Yet, recently, our community has also suffered a terrible loss of a transgender woman. And right away, LAPD did their police work and apprehended and arrested a suspect. And that shows that there's leadership, whether that was a team of police officers, but working with community, however that happened. And I want to thank LAPD for its good work. So with that said, the kind of police chief that, and now speaking for myself, is one that's committed to training, one that is committed to not just community-based reaching out, which is very important, but things in the nature of being able to do finance and bringing up their base of law enforcement officers to do similar, so that they're bringing up mature and good leaders into the company of all the police force. I love to see, this is personal opinion, a lot of the community-based organizations have gone to co-leadership, usually male and female, and maybe that is at some future point in time where policing and where organizations will go, and bringing in the base. Because there is something to be said about leadership from different gendered body perspectives. And lastly, I like to submit to the commission that pronouns, he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs, and whatever else one identifies themselves as, is an important part of bringing personhood into community, into your line of work. And I would recommend and submit that as I begin conversations with community leaders about pronouns, that we consider that whether using it during volunteer function. I happen to be coming from a PFLAG function, so I've got a button for he, him, his. But really, this can go for all communities. So I just wanted to bring that forth to light.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Charlie Wilson.
Welcome. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you guys for holding this, just echoing the sentiments of everyone else. My name is Charlotte Wilson. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington. And one of the best things about Los Angeles is the diversity here. And you can see it reflected in this room. It's a perfect reflection of America and the diversity in Los Angeles. So with that being said, one of the things that I would be looking for in a police chief is someone who has experience in building relationships with diverse communities. Also, someone who holds themselves and the people around them accountable even in challenging times. Someone with strong integrity and a commitment to do what's right on behalf of all people of socioeconomic backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds as well. That's it. So I was under my 2 minutes.
You sure? Okay. Anything else, come back.
Okay, thank you.
Erica Webster. Okay.
She's smart.
Abram Jr. Abram?
And we got, wait, before we go, we got a student right there. Hold on, don't let it, lock the door on that guy. Yeah, that's that guy. Hold on for a second. You want to say anything before you go? Come on, get up here. What are you doing here, and what'd you get out of it, and what didn't you get out of it?
So my name is Eamon Ennis. I'm a student at Pasadena High School. Should I bring this up a little bit? Yeah. And currently at my school, we have a social innovation program where we choose a topic that we find interesting, that we might be able to find some way to help in. And I chose to talk about community policing. And I think something that I've found to be really interesting is the words protect and serve. Because as some of the members here have talked about, a lot of people have had issues with those words because they haven't been seeing it in the same light. So I think that in that regard, I would like to see a chief who brings back the reality of protecting and serving. And really pushes the idea of helping others and helping the community, and brings the reality of really getting to know each other. And yeah, I've gotten a lot out of it. Thank you all for speaking, and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Abram Jr.
Morning, sir.
I am Abraham Jr., African Town Coalition. I am at Los Angeles, for the last 40-some years. I've been to commission meetings for the last 30 years. So I don't see no change in your police chiefs. Who's going to be the new police chiefs? Because in LA, where I'm staying at, I see y'all doing profiling, y'all doing racial discrimination, and y'all don't have no qualifications because y'all have, because your department, the people working in your department, when they see wrong, they get run out the department. So I don't see nobody qualified because y'all can't, y'all do corruption and thing against the community, abuse against the community, especially about African Americans, and y'all run the officers out the department. So I can't see, I don't see nobody's being a chief. It's gonna be the same old thing. All these killings, all y'all killing for a long time. Y'all go get away with it. So I don't see no who can be qualified or I don't care who has so-called experience. I see all the corruption's up here. It's all corrupt. Y'all one big gang, y'all kill each other. Y'all kill people in the community a lot, you know. A lot of black people, we go to police commission meetings and y'all, we do this, we talk, we speak, you know, people, community members, and people talk and y'all don't care, y'all don't pay attention. Y'all come out with a justified homicide and all kind of, you know, always getting away with murder. We call it murder. We don't call it what y'all call it. So what I'm gonna say is there's no chief that's qualified to be qualified. If you're a chief going out now, he should be gone too.
Thank you, sir.
Anthony Allman?
Anthony, thanks for your patience, sir.
No problem. Thank you for having the meeting. I appreciate it. My name is Anthony Allman. I've been a resident of Los Angeles my entire life. I grew up in the Valley, lived in Hollywood, Westchester, West LA. And I just want to say, and I think we all know this, that homelessness is just out of control in Los Angeles. And I want to bring the attention of the LA Times editorial piece. Everyone knows we can't arrest our way out of homelessness, so why is LA still trying? And the one thing I would ask for a police chief, the new chief, is to develop a comprehensive homeless engagement and outreach strategy. It's so important. I think in what I've seen, talking to a lot of homeless veterans who I work with on a daily basis, the police are wrapped up with failures to appear and confiscating items, and they're unable to focus on the real issue, which is public safety. A lot of these homeless veterans that I work with, they're not a threat to society. They're just having a really hard time, and they can recover. And I think that they can do it with the assistance of the social service organizations, primarily the police department. I understand, for example, I was in the military. You know, the military was not designed to do nation building, yet it had to do it anyway. And I understand that the police department is not a social welfare organization, but sadly, this is the mission that you have. And so I think the new police chief needs to design a strategy to assess its resources and apply it to helping the homeless get the services they need. And I think ultimately, in the long run, it'll free up services so that you can focus on public safety. The last item I just want to add is I think it's so important that the new chief harnesses technology, both for transparency, but also another concern is disaster response. A lot of the people I talk to within the fire department or the police department all say that this is a big issue, and the civilian community or us here are not prepared for it. And that's something that the new leader needs to talk about as well.
Anthony, do you want to talk about a couple of the ideas that you have regarding police interaction with homeless vets that you think that a new chief should be sensitive to?
Yeah. So again, I work primarily with homeless veterans. Many police officers happen to be former military. They are veterans. They have a peer-to-peer connection with those homeless veterans. One of the things that I would like to see specifically is further integration with the Department of Veteran Affairs here. What most people don't know is that there's about to be 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing there over the next 10 years. There are several services offered. There's a welcome center. There's legal services offered on that campus. And I think if the department is aware of the abundant resources that are available on that campus, it's going to be helpful to not only the homeless veterans, but everyone in the community, because those veterans are going to get the services that they need, as opposed to being taken away in a car downtown, and that officer is wrapped up for, let's say, 30 minutes, right? So if you were to call the police, that's one officer who can't respond. So I think little things like that, partnerships with both the federal, county, and city officials, the other 87 cities in LA County can be helpful. So that's just one item. That's my area of expertise. I'm sure there's other,
No, it's helpful.
yeah,
Thank you, sir.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Erica Webster, is she back yet?
Erica, welcome.
Thank you so much. I heard I got my name called and I had to go feed the meter. So apologies for missing out on that.
Did you catch it?
Yeah, and there's a parking lot, which I now made use of. So just not used to free parking.
See, that's what we want. We want a chief that'll say, you know what, I made a mistake. You know, I should have parked in a parking lot instead of put a quarter in the meter.
Well, I have some
Thanks for
other
your
suggestions
honesty.
as well. So I am a new resident of LA, but I hope to live here for the foreseeable future. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to have some input right now. So what I would like to see in a police chief is someone who recognizes the history of underinvestment in LA's communities of color, except when it comes to policing. So I'm supportive of increased implicit bias training, first responders training, helping police officers know what to do when someone's experiencing a mental health crisis. However, what is often the strategy for police departments is to request millions of dollars to provide these trainings. And that every dollar that goes to the police departments for these trainings comes at the expense of community services in the communities that have been underinvested in. So while we need these services in the police department, we cannot continue to take away money from education, from social work services, from mental health treatment in the community, because that is continuing to further the problem. And so I would hope that the next police chief understands this history and shows a little bit more budget ingenuity in trying to provide his department with these services. So not investing in drone pilot programs, not buying militarized equipment, and not spending time policing people who are not really hurting anyone. People who are suffering from addiction, people who are homeless. I go to UCLA as well, and one of my colleagues in the social work program volunteers for a direct service outreach program to homeless people. And she said she spent many months trying to get a certain individual an ID so that he could receive services, receive food stamps, get everything that he needed. And during one of these euphemistically called like sanitation cleanups, a police officer took that man's bag of belongings and threw it in the trash. And they had to start all over again, which is highly counterproductive, to put it in the most positive light that you could. So, yeah, we are taking money away from the communities who have never had exactly what they needed and using it to fund the police department, which has always been overly funded while the community has been underinvested in. The second thing I would like to say is, as a graduate student at UCLA, I am looking for a police chief who is not only willing to look at data and try to find exactly how he can improve his department by sharing data with researchers and the public, but actually wants to do that and wants to forward and improve that connection. So please find someone who will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Bryant, sir, do you know Erica from UCLA? Would you invite Erica over to a lunch meeting with you and myself? Thanks.
Okay, now Adam Smith.
Anybody else? Come on up. Again, even if you didn't fill out a card and you'd like to speak, we're friends here, do it.
Hi, my name's Casey. I also went to UCLA, just graduated.
Way to go, Casey.
But I've been hearing everyone, and I totally agree, like we want someone who says that they want to train people in implicit bias, and maybe we want specifically a female chief, but I want someone who's demonstrated in the past that they've been aware of their own implicit bias. and that they have personally done work to counteract that in their policing.
Okay, wait. Say that again slower for me, okay?
I want someone who's examined their own personal implicit bias and taken steps to counteract that in their policing. And I mean, you know, like I'm white. I think most white people wouldn't even notice who the next police chief is because we don't pay attention. You know, it doesn't matter to most white people's lives. So go ahead, like, get someone that's a person of color. I don't think that there would be any backlash from white people, and I think that would really lift up a lot of marginalized communities. But basically, just even if they aren't a person of color or a woman, because I don't think you should hire someone based solely on external factors like that, make it someone who's listened to women and learned from women, someone who's lived next door to someone of, you know, a different ethnicity. So that's
Good.
it. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks for your time. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Washington. I'm a longtime resident of Los Angeles.
Kevin, welcome,
particularly
sir.
South Los Angeles. I live in the, thank you. I live in the Ladera Heights section of LA now. I've lived through 4 police chiefs, starting with Daryl Gates, then Willie Williams, then after Willie Williams, it was Chief Bernard Parks, who's on the council now, then Bill Bratton, and obviously Chief Beck, who's on his way out. And although I've had my issues with Los Angeles Police Department, you know, not all favorable, but not all unfavorable. What I'd like to see the next chief focus on, however, is I would like for him to be a financial and budgetary disciplinarian. I feel like the police department's budget needs to be examined and reviewed on a more frequent basis. I don't know if that's the responsibility of the city comptroller, but I see a lot of resources that seem to go to the police department that may not have the checks and balances that is needed. A lot of times I'll see police deployed at certain events, and they'll be grouped, you know, 5, 6, 7 deep, just talking to each other and really not policing the event. I'm not sure what the police department spends on vehicles and other equipment, but a lot of that goes underutilized or unused. So I'd like them to do a better job of using the resources that the residents of Los Angeles commits to the police department for the purpose of policing and being active in the community. Second point I'll make real quick.
Take your time.
Is that I'd like for the police department to be a lot more active in the community and not in the sense of just police and being community members. You'll rarely see, if outside of Venice and a few other places near the UCLA campus and some USC, you'll rarely see Los Angeles police officers walking. I mean, you don't never see them. You don't even see them on Segways. They're either on horses in Expo Park, or you'll see them in squad cars or on motorcycles less frequently. So it would be nicer if they would actually spend more time, you know, immersing themselves in the community. And can I make one quick point? I know my time is up.
Go ahead.
I happened to be eating at an eatery on Crenshaw about 3 months ago, and there was a police officer in there, and he happened to also be in the same eatery buying food, and he was by himself. It wasn't a whole phalanx of police officers there. He bought his food. He engaged and talked with the people that were also in this restaurant, and then he sat down and ate his food there. And then it's something I've never done in my life before. I actually came up to that police officer and I complimented him for actually not being distant from the community. And what he told me was 2 things that I'll remember. He said, "Thank you very much for saying that to me." And he said, "The next time you see a police officer doing this, thank him as well, because we need to hear that."
Exactly right.
And that's the conclusion of my comments.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now we have Adam Smith.
Okay, is there anyone else who hasn't spoken that would like to come up and say anything? Okay, Mr. Smith, and then if anybody wants to add, and then we'll just, I'm going to hang in here for a little bit for anybody that was mic shy. Mr. Smith?
Everyone else introduced themselves, so I should too. My name's Adam Smith. I've lived on the west side for the 15 years that I've lived in Los Angeles, and the majority of that time is right here in the 0025. I volunteer with a group called Burrito Project that we gather at someone's apartment, make 84 burritos and bring them down to Venice. We're in our 9th year. And we were serving food the night that Brendan Glenn got killed by LAPD. And that officer, while he's no longer with the force, there was no prosecution or anything. So I think he's allowed to be a police officer anywhere else. But so the point of this is that I feel like there's been this criminalization of the homeless, and what I don't want in a new police chief, as we've seen since from 2011 to 2016, arrests have gone down by the LAPD 15%, which, you know, that's a great thing. But in the same 5 years, we've seen the arrests of homeless go up 31%. And a lot of that is just like criminalization of like unpaid fines, unpaid tickets, which ends up putting these people into the system. And so in a new chief, I don't want someone that will continually normalize this behavior. Also, I don't want in a new chief someone that, like in Boyle Heights in 2016 in August, an officer shot and killed a suspect in Boyle Heights, and 12 days later, shot and killed 14-year-old Jesse Romero. And I don't want in a new chief someone that will allow this type of, I can only imagine what it's like to shoot and kill someone. Even under the worst circumstances, I imagine that it takes a mental toll on someone. And I don't think anyone should be out on the street 12 days later where a 14-year-old person was killed. I'll finish real quick. This morning, President Soboroff, you asked me to show you a little respect, and I promised that I never come to these meetings taking time out of my day, as you've seen, taking time out of my family's day, to be disrespectful. I love this community. I love Los Angeles. That's why I'm here. That's why we're raising a family here. And as a few people have said, I think it's just valuable for me as a white person who's lived on the West Side, who doesn't experience marginalization by the Los Angeles Police Department. I don't think I still think it's worth lifting up that all communities don't experience this. That's all I got, I think. Thanks.
Okay. Final word. Back again. Welcome.
I just wanted to say something while I'm less nervous and can articulate myself better. There's one other point I wanted to bring up, not being first now, is that I do know a lot of officers, both personally and also just through word of mouth, that do not live in Los Angeles. Right. A lot are recruited from other states. A lot of live outside of Los Angeles City. And I would like to see the next police chief possibly incentivize these officers to live within Los Angeles. I think there's a certain accountability when you live amongst the peoples that you are protecting and serving. And I think, you know, if you know your neighbor and he or her, she's a police officer, I think there's definitely some sort of mutual respect. And I think I would like to see more of that. A lot of them go home to see me or wherever, Orange County. But I would like to see, you know, some sort of incentive for officers to live here amongst, you know, the community. Outside of officers, obviously, that are undercover where safety is a concern, I do think there's something that needs to be looked at as well.
I'd like your message to be heard by every landlord and every property owner.
I agree, and sometimes, and I know that the financial issue is a big one.
But it's great for their property, it's great for the value of their property, it's great for their neighborhoods, and it's great for our
Agreed.
officers.
But I'm also talking about instances where it's not financial too. And then maybe also having a program, you know, within LAPD that is subsidized to help these officers either buy or rent within the city.
Thanks. Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. We're on schedule. If you've got any other questions, you can reach us. Again, go to the survey, tell your friends, and I'll hang around for a few minutes if anybody was a little shy.
Hi, my name's Louie and I'm at Pan Pacific Park and you're watching LA City View 35. It's our city, it's our channel.